This is the Listening Tube.
Hello, thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. I'm your host, Bob Woodley. On this episode, we'll hear about Boy Scouts and United Artists. Plus, I'll have a chat with actor Matt Drago. But first,
Not the headlines.
as I've recently reiterated, I created the Listening Tube because I found the legacy media to have gone way off course. To be more specific, there was a fork in the road and the network news took the left fork. If you think anything's changed because of the new administration, the networks have one thing to say: fork you. As has been demonstrated by the difference in the press coverage of the recent pardons by both President Biden and then President Trump. The former pardoned all of his family members, many of them with only 20 minutes left as president, as well as anybody else he thought might need it in the future. Preemptive pardons, with the exception of his son Hunter. In addition to his family members, he also issued preemptive pardons to political critics of Donald Trump, like Liz Cheney and General George Milley, as well as anyone he thought might become a subject of a Trump administration investigation. With the exception of Hunter, all done in the waning days of his tenure as president. Donald Trump pardoned nearly all of the defendants in the storming of the Capitol building on January 6th, 2021, as well as the founder of the Silk Road dark website, who was serving a life sentence for the activity he enabled there. In all, Biden pardoned or commuted the sentences of more than 2,500 people in the last weeks of his presidency, while Trump did the same for about 1,000 fewer people in the first week of his presidency. There's other minutia I could delve into, but this isn't a story about the current and former presidents. It's about the coverage we got from the media. The Media Research Center analyzed both morning and evening news programs on the major networks for the first 2.5 days of the Trump administration until the morning of January 22nd. So what did they learn when it came to coverage of presidential pardons? Well, let's just say it's not exactly balanced. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and describe it as more like a 200-pound sixth grader sitting on one end of the teeter-totter while his third-grade sister is sitting on the other end. More specifically, the networks of ABC, CBS, and NBC, over the 5-day part studied, spent 46 minutes and 32 seconds talking about Donald Trump's pardons of January 6th defendants, or as the president calls them, hostages, while they spent a whopping 3 minutes and 32 seconds talking about the preemptive pardons Biden issued on the same day as the Trump pardons. That's a disparity of 46-3. If that were a score of a sporting event, it would be considered a blowout. The study also broke it down by network show. For example, the story says ABC's Good Morning America, coupled with World News Tonight, spent 15.5 minutes talking about Trump's pardons, while Biden's got 34 seconds of attention. As for CBS, their shows, CBS Mornings and CBS Evening News, used slightly more than 16.5 minutes on Trump's pardons, with only 4 seconds over a minute on the Biden preemptive pardons. While both actions were criticized by friend and foe alike, Trump said he would do it, and he did it, knowing that he'd have to answer for it as his term was only beginning. He didn't hide his intentions. On the contrary, Joe said he wouldn't do it, and he did, as he was walking out the door. But what got the most coverage as it was happening was the one we already knew was going to happen, and nobody was surprised when it did. Whether or not you agree with Trump's pardons is irrelevant. Same with Biden's. But the news is supposed to tell us what happened in case we need to know something, not tell us what happened after we already knew it was going to happen. Sure, the news could do both, but they didn't. Even after his term was up and he didn't have to answer to anybody, the legacy media still tried to downplay, if not hide, his last insult to our country. Instead, they chose to bring more attention to something that didn't need any more attention than it already got from the guy who made it a story in the first place. I know, it's only been a week. Maybe the media will learn that they're not serving the American people when they behave the way they have for the past 8 years. In the meantime, the media will keep reminding us that President Trump hasn't yet brought down the price of eggs.
Let's go back through the listening tube for This Week in History.
This week in 1910, a Chicago publisher named William D. Boyce filed the paperwork to incorporate the Boy Scouts of America. He became aware of the organization while lost in the London fog, when a boy with a lantern offered to help him find his way. When the American publisher tried to tip the young man for his assistance, the boy refused, saying, "No, sir, I am a scout. Scouts do not accept tips for courtesies or good turns." Bill Boyce began recruiting boys in America who wanted to learn patriotism, courage, self-reliance, and kindred virtues, according to the Chronicle of the 20th Century. In America today, the Boy Scouts are called Scouting America, and girls can join too, much to the dismay of Girl Scouts, who accuse the Boy Scouts of poaching the Girl Scout ranks. I enjoyed my time as a Boy Scout. I once got a canoe with a slow leak, and about 45 minutes in, the 6 or 7 inches of water inside my canoe forced it to tip me out when I made a turn. There I was, treading water in the river, while fellow scouts in their canoes came to my aid. As much as I tried to get back into my canoe, I couldn't hoist myself back in without the other side of the canoe springing upward. Finally, another canoeist held down the other side so I could climb back in. But just before that happened, as I was treading water, my foot hit the bottom. "Never mind, I can stand." Even though my boots were filled with water. I once broke a finger at Boy Scout camp, but didn't tell anybody because I thought they'd send me home. The middle finger on my right hand is still crooked today. Ask me to show it to you sometime. This week in 1919, Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, Douglas Fairbanks, and D.W. Griffiths launched United Artists. That was the year my maternal grandmother was born, so I don't remember it myself. Yet all of those names still ring a bell. It began as a venture, premised on allowing actors to control their own financial and artistic interests, rather than being dependent upon commercial studios. Commercial studios have pretty much ruled Hollywood since the early days of cinema, and for the most part, still do. But the tide is turning in media of all types. It wasn't long ago that I couldn't create a program on my own and distribute it worldwide, but the Listening To podcast has been heard in more than 50 countries. As such, independent creators are filling the internet with content that was unavailable just a short time ago, and independent filmmakers now have more avenues than ever before to promote and expose their work to larger audiences. More on that in a moment.
The listening tube will return at the speed of sound. Contact the listening tube by calling 570-601-1101 or email thelisteningtube@outlook.com.
My guest this week plays a part in an independent film in theaters now called Somewhere in Montana. This film is not only captivating in its cinematography, but also has a story to tell. I spoke with Matt Drago, who plays the part of a movie director in the movie Somewhere in Montana. I do want to make sure I have the pronunciation of your name correct. It's Matt Drago?
Drago, yeah.
Okay, you may not get that question a lot, seeing as a lot of people probably know exactly who you are, but
Uh,
I
no, no, it happens a lot because it's Drago for Rocky 4, so no, I get it.
okay. Well, my wife wanted me to ask you that just so I didn't make myself look like a fool the whole time. So
Appreciate
I
that.
was more than happy to take her advice. So Matt, tell me about your new film, Somewhere in Montana.
Absolutely. It's a story of the time, Bob. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on your show today. It's a way to get this film out there. This is a little story that could. It's a story of the times. I play a West Coast director. His name's Fabian Verdugo. It basically takes place where I'm coming into a rancher's world because I need this location for my last scene of my film. And that's where I meet my friend Graham McTavish, and John Alexander is the role that he plays, and it's his ranch. And so basically, we're put in this compromising position where even though we're two uniquely different people from two different worlds, we need each other because his ranch is basically on life support financially, and he needs the money from the film in order to carry it on. And so, Lainey, played by my friend Kaylee Macchio, who plays his daughter in the film, is trying to be the peacemaker, saying, give these people a chance, right? Because a lot of people in Montana, like they don't want things to be affecting their world, right? And so essentially it becomes a story of the times where two different people that don't get each other, our energies are drastically different. Politically, socially, we align completely differently. So it's a way for audiences to see how two people from two uniquely different worlds can come together within this country and find some mutual respect, which I find is the highest form of love. And Brandon Smith, the writer of and director of the film, does an extraordinary way of really making the conversations within the film authentic. Graham and I have a 10-page scene that's just the two of us. And we took a lot of time really just diving into how to make this a conversation between two guys, just like we're having right now. And so it really becomes this like conversation piece. And, as an actor, honestly, I've always dreamed of films like this in my career that are conversation starters that, really start to force people to be a little introspective. And I think it's a really, really great conversation starter for where we're at right now in the times that we're in this country.
Yes, certainly social reconciliation is in order, I think, for a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. Now, you've directed for TV, but do you have any experience as a movie director?
I have not directed for TV. I
Oh,
don't
I'm
know
sorry.
where you saw that one. Maybe in the future, maybe you just put it out there. So hand to God, that would be great.
Okay.
Um,
So then we've established you have no experience as a director.
Not as an actual director, just a director as an actor in a movie, a movie
Okay.
within a movie.
So how did you prepare for this role?
That's a great question. So I basically showed up on set early, about a week early, and I just shadowed Brandon. It was a very unique experience within this film, and we really developed and collaborated the character together because a lot of John Alexander and Fabian Verdugo, the two main characters of the film, he kind of wrote himself into because he lives in Polson, Montana, but he's also a director. And so I felt like the best way that I could, kind of understand how he runs a set and how a set is run is to show up to set a little bit early. So I actually took a little voyage and I actually stopped in Vegas. I stopped in Zion. I kind of, hiked and really started to find the tempo of the character. And then when I showed up to set, it was go time. I really just kind of got to hang out with AJ Young, our incredibly talented cinematographer, Brandon Smith, and just kind of figure out how he ran his set. And it was just a really, really special time for me to be able to engage with him and to be able to understand how I could best serve the character in his film.
Now, when you read the original script, was your role pretty accurate reflection of what a director does or goes through during a shoot?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that God, that's a tough question. Tell me to say that question one more
Well,
time.
was the script written in a way that reflects the actual experiences of a director?
Yeah, I would actually say it is. I mean, I think it's very true to form in that it is basically somebody that is fighting within a lot of different elements. You know, there are a lot of elements to what makes a film click and what makes it happen, right? And I think that when you realize that you are in film specifically, you understand how much you need other people because it's a real master of craft, a real collaboration between the people that can hang the lights the way that you can't and get the sound just right the way that you can't and can get that rolling shot just the way that you can't. And so I think the way that I composed the character of Fabian is that he is a team player, but he is somebody that runs the ship. And so he's passionate about that. He wants to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that everybody's doing their job. I think he sees his film crew as his family. And so I think within that, I wanted to showcase that, yeah, people that, are fighting for their dreams can be, sometimes overly passionate, overly emotional. We all are within our own dreams, right? But film is his dream. And so he relies on the people that are part of that dream with him. He protects his actors. He's very keen on making sure that everybody is collectively together and he will protect that entity, to the end. So I think that was one thing that I really wanted to showcase with him because again, one thing that the theme of the film really dives into is legacy. And, John's legacy is what I would call a more simplistic one in nature, not better or worse, but he has a ranch that's been in his family, true American legacy, and he built it from the ground up. And so I think a lot of, this film is the two different worlds understanding and honoring what legacy means to one another. And I think that's a really, really big part of what I wanted to do as a character in Fabian is to just show the broadness of what a film legacy looks like and all of the moving parts, because a lot of times you are fighting with investors. You are trying to, beckon actors that maybe aren't within budget. You are running against the clock a lot of times, and that leads to a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. My character has a worry stone, which is his Irish penny that his grandfather gave to him, and he rubs it and rolls it all the time. But it's those kinds of elements to the character that make him very 360, very real. And when we have these conversations, in the film, they are grounded, even though he is a very passionate character.
Now, in the film, you're the director making another film. So, what is that film about, and does it play a role in the friction between you and the owner of the ranch, played by Graham McTavish?
You're asking all the great questions today. Yes, it does. It does. It really does play an incredible role because the film in and of itself is composed about acceptance and female empowerment and kind of just basically to showcase like that we need to evolve past the patriarchy in this country. Also that, we need to embrace like all types of sexuality, right? It's what makes our country great is trying to work for acceptance and in sexuality. The two lead characters are female and they are in a romantic love story together, basically resisting a violent and demonic patriarchal character, right? So it does, in a way, have a resistance in terms of the themes towards what John Alexander would normally, go consume as a moviegoer. And so I think that innately becomes also a conflict on top of everything else. But what I try to show John in the character of Fabian is, just my love for the craft. And even if the themes aren't necessarily in line with how he views the world, we can start to dive into this really common theme of the film, Somewhere in Montana, which is that you don't have to agree on everything. That, one of the things that makes this country great is our ability to agree to disagree, but also be kind to one another. And I think that, one thing that I learned just being on the actual set of Somewhere in Montana is once you get to know people, even if they don't politically, religiously, socially align with your values, it's very hard to hate them. And we all get to this place right now in our society where on social media, we see one thing, we regurgitate what we're fed, right? And sometimes we don't even know the facts of what is being said, right? And we take that as the word. And that's what becomes dangerous. So I think Brandon Smith does an incredible job of articulating that issue and bringing it to the forefront because once Fabian and John are in space and we start to see each other and we start to honor each other with the legacies that we're seeing, whether he's seeing me direct a big scene in the film or whether I'm seeing him open up about his ranch and what it means to him, we start to align a little bit more in the fact that we start to see a path forward in our relationship.
In other words, we also have things in common, although we may have differences.
It's a great picture that I actually have on my Instagram, and it's a very slice of life picture that really always resonates to me about when I fully realized just the power of this film. And it's a very simple picture. It's right in front of the cattle ranch, and it's four of us. It's Graham playing the Montana rancher, and David, the real life cattle rancher, and Brandon, the director, and me. And it's just the four of us just standing there, and it was a moment where I realized because I had talked to David, the actual owner of the cattle ranch, who, believe it or not, wasn't so keen on whether he wanted a film production actually on. So very meta, right? He wasn't sure because it becomes a part of their story too, and that's something that you need to honor and understand. And I asked him a very simple question, but he knew exactly what I meant. David, the actual cattle ranch owner, and because again, I eat meat, I go out for a steak dinner, and I honor what they do. And I looked at David because I know he cares about his ranch, he cares about his cattle, and I looked at him and I said, David, how do you do this? And his simple response, and it was the first time I ever saw him get a little watery in the eyes, because again, Montana ranchers is very inward, right? It's like very short, concise, conversations with people on the ranch. But in that moment, he got very emotional and he looked up at the sun and he just said, "Oh, it's still hard." And that was at the moment where I really understood, like, we need each other. Like, regardless of our differences, there is more that can bring us together than could ever divide us if we start seeing people as fully 360 people and stop what we're doing in society, where we distance ourselves from severing ourselves from the real relationships that exist on this earth, but two people in space, and we start to allow technology and media and social media to essentially get us to think how we're actually really not thinking. It gets us away from ourselves. So yeah, in a nutshell, it really showed me just the power dynamic of this film and what it can do.
Now, how much of this film was actually made in Montana?
All of it. All of it was shot in Polson, Montana, which is a quaint little town overlooking the Flathead Lake, the beautiful mountains of Montana. I got to tell you, Bob, not a more beautiful place in the world to shoot a film. I mean, Brandon jokes all the time. All I had to do was point the camera at the hillside and, get that sun setting over the mountains. And, I always say, like, shooting in a place like Montana, your creative juices are just already going because again, you are in the midst of God's wallpaper. And it's an extraordinary place to be. And what was incredible about it is how much the cast and crew really bonded through Montana. We would go on hikes together. We would go to the lodge together. Shout out to the shoe. We would go to Betty's Diner together. And get our breakfast together. We really couldn't get enough of each other. And within that, we opened up to each other. We'd, be by the fire pits having these really long conversations. It's almost like the film like really interpreted a lot of the conversations that we were having off screen, and that energy that we had off screen as a dynamic ensemble cast really channeled back on screen for the final product of the film, and it just made it the most extraordinary artistic experience that I've ever had in my life.
It certainly sounds like an ideal situation. Now, how do the actual citizens of Montana compare to the characters in the film?
Dead on. I mean, really, actually, a lot of the characters were based off of real characters that were in the town. The bartender, like she is literally a real bartender, which is another picture I have behind the scenes where we actually met the real person that is like playing the bartender. So it really does speak to Brandon, really leaning into writing what he knows. And I think that's what all good writers do. But within that, and I think this is what made it extraordinary as an experience, is he was allowing everybody to bring themselves to the character and whatever that meant to them. I'll give you an example of my friend Andrew Roa, who plays Bob. He pulled from a lot of his Native American roots, and there's a really powerful scene that's a ceremony within the film. And he started singing this Native American song, and all of us got so emotional because of what it meant because there's a big giving away ceremony, and it's something that Native Americans do where they grieve very hard for a year, and then they start to relinquish that by giving some of those items away of the person so that they can live on through everybody and that they can start to move on with the rest of their journey in the real in life. And so, it's elements like that. I'll open up about one for me. I lost my stepfather, and he was just a rock for me in my life. I have a biological dad, but my stepfather was equally my dad as well. And losing him was very hard for me. And I channeled a lot of that energy within my own character, within Fabian, where maybe he has a lack of a father figure because there is a little bit of that dynamic between John and Fabian. And so I channeled that, the loss of a father. And within that scene that I was just talking about, the ceremony, I'm actually wearing a Tree of Life pendant. Well, that Tree of Life pendant actually has Chaz's ashes in it. So I carried him with me. And it's that type of camaraderie, it's that kind of space that Brandon gave us to really tell a great story, but to also do the things that we needed as actors to really be on point and to make sure that we were really emotionally engaged at all times. It made it really so special.
Well, I certainly sympathize with you. My stepfather played a major role in my upbringing as well, and both he and my biological father have since passed away. But it seems like the women in this film are the ones who have the cooler heads and are the characters that maintain the order between you and the rancher. Is that an accurate observation?
Very accurate. And I mean, personally, I think that, I'd like to see more women leadership in this world because of that. I mean, they bring life into this world, and I think it's harder to take life out of it when you have females that are willing to check you, right? And, really, they are very level-headed. I'll speak to Michelle Hurd. Michelle Hurd plays my producer, but producers in the real world to directors are, it becomes like a brother-sister relationship. They are the people that can tell you something and you listen. And she's the one that finds this really extraordinary ranch and this really extraordinary setting because she aligns with what I want to do in the scene. And so, I think between her and Lainey, it becomes like the backbone of the meeting of these two alpha males because Brandon wrote this as a story of two alpha males, even though they're vastly different in their energies, and their sexual orientations and their political values and possibly their religious and societal values. They still are alphas. And what's unique about this character too, the two of them, is that they're both antagonists and protagonists of their own story, which is a very interesting dynamic if you think about it, because most people see a film and they see the good guy and the bad guy. Well, we're both good and bad to each other. And we almost become like that working, cog towards the end, that, machine of can we find a way forward? Can we do that? And, Kat and Lainey within the story, played by Michelle Hurd, my friend Michelle Hurd. I don't have enough great things to say about her. She's just an incredible lover of actors. And Kaylee Macchio, who plays Lainey, are the guide rails to take us to that destination.
Well, thank God for women then, huh?
Amen. Amen. Very astute question. I love that, Bob.
Now, you did mention that, earlier that this film is about legacy. Is is that the whole message of the film, or does it tell us something else as well?
I think what Brandon really wanted to do is he wanted it to be a talk piece. He wanted to show that we as a country do need to lean in on, I think, honoring each other's legacy. I mean, that is a huge part of the American dream, right? And it doesn't really matter whether you're a filmmaker, a rancher, a mom, a dad, you own a local business. Everybody's legacy is part of what makes America really special, right? And so I think that legacy is a big part of it, but it's also seeing each other again. And I think what Brandon wanted to do is he wanted to put these two characters that frankly would just never be in the same room together in this impossible situation that they had to work themselves out of. And I think that is, so keen on what I think people need to see right now. Because I think if you can see it, I think this is what good art does. I think if you can see it, then you can talk about it, then you can feel it, and then you can maybe adopt it within your own life. And I think that's really what he wanted to do here. So it really speaks to just the power of, like I said, what I've always wanted as an actor, is to tell a couple good stories that matter. And I say that wholeheartedly. I mean, most actors I know, it's the same thing. A lot of people see acting as forward facing. They see the film industry as forward facing. They see, award shows and red carpets and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, everybody needs to celebrate. But when people really get down to the nitty gritty, people that get into film really, really do it for the storytelling. They do it because they want to leave a couple things behind that we feel make an impact. And not only now, films live on forever. And I think this is definitely a story of the current times that we're in. So I think it's a really wonderful time to, really take this film in and see it and give it a chance. But it's something that can really resonate, I believe, for future years to come if people can really adopt the message of this film.
Well, Somewhere in Montana is currently in theaters. You must have moved on to another project by now. What are you working on?
A lot of the film and TV industry has been, it's been stagnant for a while. We've had multiple strikes. We are currently in a wildfire crisis, one of the worst crises in LA history, and so a lot of my day to day is, putting myself on tape, seeing how things are going to pick up past all of these just real hardships in our industry. Also, a lot of industry is leaving LA, and we're trying to be LA strong and keep the film industry alive here. But I have agents in different states for that reason because again, I booked a film in Montana, right? It changed my life. So film will go where it needs to go. Artists will go where they need where they can to tell their stories, right? And a lot of times that comes to a financial realm. So for me, I think the role of Fabian Verdugo made such a keen impact on my life that it has actually adopted me to lean in on not just being an actor, but being a true collaborator. And so my wife and I actually have our own production company, Dragon Hunter Productions. Her last name is Hunter. My name, obviously, Drago. So Drago and Hunter Productions made Dragon Hunter Productions.
Nice.
We are trying to bring films like Fabian did to little pockets of this country that feel like they don't have a voice. It's something that really resonated with me playing the role of Fabian. And sometimes, you let that character in. I will say Fabian is the first role that I've truly fallen in love with. And I think he impacted me in such a big way and what a fighter he was that I want to fight to do this because I feel like a lot of the dissonance that we're feeling within our country is because people don't feel heard. And so I think in telling these stories, we want to bring a Christmas movie to our little humble town of Front Royal, Virginia, where we're both from. And that is a big step that we're looking forward to hopefully doing in the next year or so.
Well, I don't doubt your desire to chase your dream because as you've gone from Virginia to New York to LA to Montana and probably a few places in between as well that that I don't know about. But I did want to ask you specifically about Los Angeles because of the fires going on there. How might those fires affect the future of filmmaking in that area?
Yeah, it's hard to tell, Bob. I mean, the it's hard to rub the crystal ball at this point because it's so fresh, right? And we are just, getting past all of these strikes between the director, then the writer, then the actor. We're also up against AI, which is a completely other unknown or semi-known at this point, and we have to resist it, right? Because again, what I always say is that human stories matter, and I never thought I'd have to say it like that. But it really is true. Humans only uniquely can tell human stories. If we give up art to a machine, we will give up so much in our society. And so I feel like for the film industry at large right now, we really need to embrace independent films. And that's why I ask people to give indie films a chance. And that's why I'm so grateful to be on your show today, because it gives us a platform to tell our story and to get it out there to people. That way they will want to seek it. Give us a chance, turn us on, try to put the phone down or the tablet down for an hour and a half and really just lean in on a film that's really important. But back to your question, I mean, we really do hope that LA, this is what I say about LA all the time because I love LA and I think LA gets a bad rep, but LA is a town full of dreamers and dreamers are fighters. Don't get that wrong. Like there are a lot of strong people in LA and I really do resonate with a lot of dreamers. They're my people, right? And a lot of dreamers will sacrifice for their dreams to the nth degree. And so my hope is that we'll pull together, we'll build LA back up, and we'll keep telling stories here just like we have for generations and generations in the past.
Well, I agree with you there, Matt, because I was one of those people who went to LA to chase a dream. I ended up sleeping in the streets for a while, actually.
Hmm.
But
Well,
hey, that's just part of the experience of life. Things eventually worked out, and but you're right. There are all kinds of dreamers in that area, and I guess if there are enough who aren't afraid to get their hands dirty as well, they can rebuild it. Do you expect it to get any easier now that you can call yourself a movie star?
well, first of all, I'm far from a movie star. I'm just trying to be a working actor, and that's always been the dream, to be perfectly honest, Bob. I mean, I know people that, are getting to that realm, and yes, I mean there's some perks that come with it, but it can also have its challenges as well. I think for me, I want to get up every day and just be able to say I get to do what I love. But to, not dissuade your question. Could it help? I hope so. I really do. Because regardless of anything, you have to be able to use what you have to get the next project going, right? And if somewhere in Montana helps me do that, then that's great because then it gets another story to my little town that I'm from, and maybe it pulls another couple good actors into the project, and maybe it pulls a great cinematographer or a great director into the project. So it's all good because we have to take where we're at in our lives and bet on ourselves sometimes and fight for what we believe we can do within our life. And if it's like me going back to my 4-year-old self the first time I got on stage and saying, "Wow, I really feel the power in being able to tell a great story, and I just want to do this my whole life," because I think it makes an impact to tell stories. If somewhere in Montana is a big stepping stone to help do that, then I'll be grateful for just the journey continuing in any way that it can. If it's close to you, I post all the theaters that it's in on my social media at Matt Drago, MattDrago. From there, you have my link tree. It's got my website for my acting, which is mattdrago.com. It's got my production website, dragonhunterproductions.com on the link tree. It's also got my IMDb if you want to check out my past and future projects going on. And then also, I'm a person, so I share, actual, personal stuff as well on my stories and on my social media as well, because I want to show that, like, yeah, I mean, I'm a real person. I'm flawed just like everybody else, but I definitely, urge people to join in the journey and join in on the ability to take in really, really good stories that matter.
The film is called Somewhere in Montana, and it's in theaters now. Many thanks to Matt Drago for sharing his insight about the film and inspiring us to reach out to our fellow man and follow our dreams wherever they may take you.
I might be moving to Montana soon, just to raise me up a crop of.
The Listening Tube is written and produced by yours truly. Copyright 2025. Thank you for putting your ear to the Listening Tube. Support the show or text me from the homepage. I'm your host, Bob Woodley, for Thou Ad Infinitum.